Okaydi, welcome back to my channel, May Between the Pages. My name is Taylor, and today we're going to be doing the 2 books with 1 stone book tag. I was tagged by Leanne over on Leanne Reads, a really good friend of mine. If you haven't subscribed to her, please do. Thank you so much for tagging me, Leanne. I believe the original creator of this tag was Sean Breathe's books, so I'll have the original also linked down below just to give credit where credit is due. Now, I haven't done a tag video in a hot minute, so when Leanne tagged me in this, I got kind of excited. It felt more like OG BookTube back when I first started, and I was thinking, why not bring tags back? Like, I had some really fun times doing some of the more out there tags. I also actually made one of my own called the Personal Canon tag that I would like to kind of bring back into the light because I'm very proud of that, actually. So I don't know, I'm all for like, bring tags back. I think they're really fun. And this one was really unique in that it's called 2 Books with 1 Stone. So it focuses on like the second book on your TBR, or it focuses on the second in line rather than the first, which is what we usually talk about. So I thought that was kind of refreshing. And I'm really glad that Leanne tagged me in this because coming up with some of these answers was pretty fun. So question number 1 is the second to last book you read, and that is Nettle and Bone by T. Kingfisher. I recently filmed a recent reads video, and it should definitely be up before this one, and I raved about that book during the video. It was such a pleasant surprise. I got it on a whim from my library here. I don't know, I was just going through the recent arrivals, and I hadn't had any interest in Kingfisher before now, which also why? Like, I love dark fairy tales, so I'm not really sure why I wasn't drawn to Kingfisher at all before now, but I just decided to pick it up on a whim, and it blew me away. It was so incredibly good. It's dark fairy tale adjacent without slotting too perfectly into that genre that it becomes tropey. It's got wonderful, like, motley crew characters. It's got deepness to it that allows it to kind of have a heavier weight and settle with you alongside some of the more whimsical, magical elements. It's just a triumph of a book. I adored it. And it was also a reminder to pick up random books sometimes, even if it's not on your TBR, because you might find a new favorite. The next prompt here is second book from the top of your TBR, and for me, that is either The Stone Sky by N.K. Jemisin. I say either or because I might have to return this to my library. It depends on if someone else has a hold on it. If they do, then I'm gonna have to say goodbye to this book for a little while, and it won't be on my TBR for June. But if I am able to extend my hold, this will be the second from the top of my TBR. But in the case that I can't, the next book that I want to pick up is Into the Riverlands by Nevo. This is the 3rd book in the Singing Hills cycle, and I was so excited when I looked up on my American library Libby app and found that they do have this entire series. I love the first 2, and one of my goals for this year is to finish out series that I have open, so this is a perfect opportunity to do that. I love the audiobooks, and they had them all. So the next one in the series is Into the Riverlands. I specifically wanted to do this one via audio because I feel like the narrator has just a silky, smooth, incredible narration that adds to the experience in a way that I think reading physically wouldn't. Number 3 is 2 2-star reads. Now, I wanted to pick some books that maybe you all haven't heard me talk about on the channel. I either read them at the beginning of the channel or before I started, just to give, you know, some flavor, something interesting, because there are some books that you all know that are 2 stars and that I did not like. For example, House of Sky and Breath, you know, by Mass. I have a whole rant review on that book, and I feel like it's not as interesting if I talk about something you guys already know. So I picked 2 kind of more from the archives. The first one is My Sister, the Serial Killer. I wanted to love this book so much. I read it when I was going through my thriller phase a couple of years ago, and it's from the perspective of a woman whose sister is a serial killer, and she always has to clean up her messes in order to keep her from getting caught. And it's such a unique and interesting perspective. I could not wait to read this. But something about it did not click with me. I remember the pacing felt off to me. And while we were getting the internal dialogue of this sister, we weren't getting enough of like the context in which that dialogue was taking place, if that makes sense. It was a little bit too much in her head, and I couldn't really find a grip on the story. It felt a little bit too liminal for me, I guess. So I don't think it was necessarily a bad book. Like, I don't remember thinking that the writing was bad or anything like that. It just wasn't what I wanted. The next one, however, I really didn't like, and that is The Silence of the Girls. This one was kept from being 1 star because there was one perspective that I found interesting. But this book really bothered me because it's marketed as the Trojan War from the perspective of the women who often don't get seen in these stories. And then one of the perspectives is Achilles. And I'm like, I have read this from Achilles' perspective so many times. Like, Achilles already has the Song of Achilles, okay, by Madeline Miller. He don't need nothing else. Like, I was so annoyed when I picked this book up and found that one of the perspectives was his. Because that's not what it's marketed as, and that's not the point, I thought, of this story. And then all of the female characters, when they did interact, like, I'm not looking for, like, girl power yay. It can be realistic, and we can have backstabby, you know, female characters in this story, because it's a very harsh world for them. I get that. But every single female character was, like, catty and awful to each other. And it just, I don't know, it didn't offer anything unique or interesting about this story to me. Unfortunately, the perspective I liked the most was Achilles. So I was like, I guess The Silence of the Girls, I guess they were kind of silent in this book, because I wasn't hearing them. Prompt number 4 is 2 great books by the same author. Now this one as well, I wanted to talk about someone that I don't usually talk about on my channel. And that's because she writes in a genre that I don't usually read. But when I have read the genre and picked up her books, they've blown my mind. And that is Elizabeth Acevedo. I've read both The Poet X and With the Fire on High by her. And these books are so far outside of my comfort zone of reading, it's wild. But I was gripped from the first page. The Poet X is written in verse, and that's another thing that I'm just not, I don't know, it's like give me poetry or give me a novel. Like, I struggle in that space in between. But she nailed it. The Poet X is absolutely gorgeous and tells the story, the coming of age story of a woman who's trying to battle, or not battle, but balance a bunch of the different aspects of her being, of her nature. It's just, it's gorgeously written. I gave that 5 stars. And then With the Fire on High, again, has that wonderful multi-dimensional main character. It's not written in verse. But Acevedo is always very good at making the character feel real and visceral, and you care about them. And then on top of that, the main character wants to become a chef, and I'm a foodie. Okay, I love cooking. There's a part of the Dandelion Dynasty, which if you read it, you know exactly what I'm talking about, that might not be for some people, but because I love food, it is very much for me. And With the Fire on a High takes time to let us sit in the kitchen with this main character and breathe in the sense and get the feeling of being in a home-style kitchen and like a big industrial kitchen, and the beauty and the love that can come from making food for someone. That was just so beautifully captured on page, and I remember that viscerally. I also remember loving the growth our main character goes through. It wasn't like a super happy, everything's perfect kind of story, but the growth was palpable, and I enjoyed watching our character go through that. So I loved both of these books. I think Elizabeth Acevedo is a very, very talented author, and that's saying something considering I don't read contemporary at all. Okay, number 5 is a bit more flexible. It says 2 bails, or 2 books you wish you bailed on, or 2 books you hated. So I kind of blended these. I did 1 book that I hated and 1 book that I wish I had bailed on. The one that I hated, and will shout to the rooftops that I hate with all of my heart, is The Catcher in the Rye. Listen, I spark noted some books in high school. Okay, I'm guilty of that, but one of the books that I read all the way through, God knows why, is The Catcher in the Rye, and I hated every second of it. That boy is insufferable. I hated every page being in his mind. I just, no, hate that book. Absolutely not. And then the one that I wish that I had DNF'd, or the one I had bailed on, is The Raven Boys. I know, I'm sorry. I know it's a BookTube baby. I know it's all vibes, no plot, and I went in knowing that, but the vibes, they weren't vibing, okay? This book and I did not get along. And I finished the first book because I wanted to know what all the hype was about. And then I started reading the second book, and I was like, why am I doing this to myself? I did not enjoy that first book even a little bit, so I stopped. like page 2 of the second book. But for me, yeah, the plot, the villain was whipped out of nowhere. It was like Stiefvater realized, oh, I don't have an antagonist here, let me create one out of thin air. I wasn't getting the found family vibes that everyone raves about. It had maybe a dark academia kind of edge to it to me. Let me know if I'm imagining that, but in my memory it did, and I am not a dark academia girly, so that could be part of it too. But I wish I had DNF'd it, because I think pushing through made me dislike it more than if I had just DNF'd it and been like, ah, that's not for me, you know? Number 6 is your 2 favorite reads so far this year. The first one was an easy pick for me, and that is by none other than my Lord and Savior, Ken Liu. I love everything the man touches. I do. And he has a short story called The Passing of the Dragon that is free on Tor.com. I was a bit late to reading it, but it changed the entire trajectory of my day, my week, when I sat down to read it. Like I said, it's free. You can read it when you are just like having your coffee in the morning or something like that. I highly recommend that you take, you know, the 20-30 minutes it would take to read it. Ken Liu just has this ability to put the liminal, the unknown, the untouchable on a page. And when you read it, you're like, oh, that's that thing that I know, but I didn't know that I knew, but that's it. You just wrote about it. And for me, that skill of his is almost unparalleled from any other author that I've read. So The Passing of the Dragon is definitely one. And the next one is one that I've talked about in my recent reads video as well, but that is Winnie the Pooh. I also mentioned this in the recent reads video, but I had watched the Disney version of that movie, The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, so many times throughout my life that I'm sure I could quote it word for word. That and Finding Nemo. I think you could drop me at any point in those videos. The videos, I was thinking VHS tapes. Good Lord, don't date yourself that much, Taylor. You could drop me at any point in those movies and I'd be able to pick up where you are. I'm struggling with words today, clearly. But I think I had convinced myself that I had read the book because I'd seen the movie so many times, and I hadn't. And I loved it. This is the first pick that my patrons ever did for me, and I'm so thankful to them because it was a warm hug of a book. It made me so happy. And I adored it. Just 5 bajillion stars. Number 7, 2 new favorite booktubers. Now, one of these is not necessarily new to me, but I cannot stop watching her, and that is Aubrey from Bookish Blackwell. The quality of her videos is, guys, it's so good. She's criminally underrated in the booktube space. Her audio, her background, she's killing it from all angles. And she recently released a video about why is reading so competitive, and I loved the way that she handled that discussion. I love discussion videos. Honestly, I've always wanted to do more of them here. I haven't for some reason, but I think that she handled that beautifully. I just can't get enough of her videos. So please go check her out if you haven't. And then the other one is Lit Vibes with 5. He recently rediscovered his love of reading, and it's been wonderful to watch him go through the process of finding out what he likes, what he doesn't like, and once he figures out his tastes, looking for authors to continue to read. I just loved seeing the process of him finding who he was as a reader. And he's also recently did a video about him putting up bookshelves, so we love when someone gets to the point where they got to start building bookshelves around the house. Like, welcome to the club, my dude. So I've been really enjoying his content as well. Number 8 is a book you've read twice. Now, to make this a little more difficult, a little more interesting, I decided to go for books that I've only read twice, so not books that I've read over and over again. And the first one is Jade City. You might be surprised I've only read this twice, but each time I added more tabs. This thing is ridiculous, honestly. But this, the Greenbone Saga is one of my favorite series of all time. Jade City is my second favorite in the series. Legacy takes the crown, but it's a 5-star series all the way through, so that's not saying much, really. But yeah, I've read this book twice, and I have a feeling I'll be reading it many more times in the future. And the next book, I'd forgotten how big and chonky these are to hold, is Words of Radiance by Branda Sandow. I discovered the Stormlight Archive when The Grace of Kings, that's Dandelion Dynasty, The Way of Kings, and Words of Radiance were already out, so I read these 2 and then continued on with the series. And then Oathbringer was released right after I finished the first 2, so I didn't have to reread, you know, to get to remember things. And then when Rhythm of War was about to come out, I reread the first 3. So I've only read this twice so far, but I have a feeling I'm gonna, again, reread it many times in my life, especially every time a new Stormlight Archive book comes out. Talk about a series where details matter. I plan on doing a reread before book 5 comes out this year. This is my favorite book in the Stormlight Archive, which is why I chose this one, even though technically I've only read the whole Stormlight Archive only twice. But this is my favorite book from the series. I adore it. The first time was physically, and talk about tabs. I mean, it's kind of a bit grotesque, honestly. I read it physically the first time and then the second time via audio, and I just, the vibes are immaculate. Of course, I'm running out of battery. I got 2 left. Let's see how we do. Number 9 is 2 fabulous quotes from books you've read recently. Now, of course, I can't follow the rules, so I have 2 quotes from 2 books. So I'm gonna, pardon me for looking down, but I've written them down and I'm gonna read them for you guys. The first 2 are from Nettle and Bone. The first one is, "Our own flaws infuriate us and other people." This is something that one character says to another one when they're really struggling with dealing with another character. And I think this is the kind of introspection that we all could use a little bit more of in our life. If you're having an issue with a person, maybe do a little bit of introspection, a little reflection on yourself, and see if you're playing a part in this issue. Maybe you're not, but maybe you are. You never know. And then this next one is just for funsies, because there is a possessed chicken in the story. And this is dialogue between 2 characters, and it says, "How did you get a demon in your chicken?" "The usual way. Couldn't put it in a rooster. That's how you get basilisks." This is an example of something T. Kingfisher is incredibly good at least in Nettle and Bone, which is bringing out this dry humor that really matches the kind of darker setting that we're in. The next 2 are from Yumi in The Nightmare Painter. The first one is a more lighthearted one that says, "Never let something trivial, like a sense of humor, get in the way of a good joke." Nothing deeper to say here. It just made me giggle. And then the second one is a bit deeper, where it says, "Why do we tell stories? They are a universal human experience. Every culture I've ever visited, every people I've met, every human on every planet, in every situation I've seen, they all tell stories. Men trapped alone for years tell them to themselves. Ancients leave them printed on walls. Women whisper them to their babies. Stories explain us." And I thought this was just such a beautiful passage that showed all the ways that stories show up in our lives as humans and how integral they are to us. Okay, the last part of a tag, as always, is to tag other booktubers. This one has to be divisible by 2. So I'm just gonna shout out 6 different channels, but if I don't mention you, please feel free to do this as well if you're watching. The first is gonna be Shell Space, the second, Bookish Blackwell, the third, The Fantasy Network, fourth, P.L. Stewart, 5th, Sid Bookworm, and 6th, A Fictional Escapist. I would love to see all of your takes on this tag. Again, bring back tags. Like, I thoroughly enjoy doing this. Let me know in the comments down below if you've read any of these. If you have... As expected, my battery died before I could finish my outro, but I would love to hear any of your thoughts on the books that I mentioned in this video. And if you want to take a crack at this tag, please do, even if you weren't tagged in the video. I would love to see it. And when you do it, go ahead and tag me, let me know, or at me in the description so I can watch it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and click that bell. I'd love to have you as part of this community, and I appreciate it. But for now, I'm gonna head out. Johnny!